Hello everyone, so happy to meet you here. In this video, we are going to learn a phrase which is well known to you. In case if you are an undergraduate student in your first year, second year or third year of studies, you must have heard the word interview. Not interview, probably you must have heard the word mock interview, where your teacher must be helping you to understand more about interviews which will be attended by you in your future. In case if you have completed your undergraduate, you also will know about an interview which will put you in the right institutions in India or in abroad or anywhere in the part of the world, which is an interview for recruiting master level students. Or if you are already an employee, then you must be knowing about interview at different levels. So what are we going to learn today? We will be learning about job interviews. You must be happy to know this phrase because I am well aware that today's kids are fast and they explore all kind of information which are available related to job interviews. And I'm sure you also should have explored in the web related to job interviews. You may be in your first year or you may be in a final year. Nobody is exempted from visualizing what is available online across the globe. Right, what exactly are we going to learn in this week? This week, our focus is more on job interviews, not the mock interviews, not the interviews for your master's or any other scholarship. Our focus is more on job interviews, which is very important as an aspiring candidate, maybe in the undergraduate level or in the postgraduate level. What else we will be seeing? What else we will look in these videos? What is that we are going to learn in the videos which will be available for you in this week? We will learn what is a job interview, how many types of job interviews are there, whether all the companies follow the standard structure, whether all the companies follow the standard structure for job interviews, how as an individual we should prepare for a job interview, what are the do's and don'ts which will put us in the selected list of a company. So if you're ready, I think we can start with understanding what is a job interview. I have come across different kinds of definitions when I happen to surf the web. The reason is that I thought I should give you an updated information from different and authentic resources. Just look into the screen. A job interview is a conversation which occurs between a potential employer and a job applicant. This is one statement which is given by a website, an authentic website from a university. Just look into other definition that we have. A job interview is a place where the employer asks you questions about your career, personality, and life, and you answer honestly while trying to impress them. Interview is a vital component of the hiring process to hire the most qualified candidates. Again, we have one more definition which is given for an interview, a job interview. The interview is a conversation in which your objective is to get an offer of a job, and the employer's objective is to find whether you will be an asset for the organization. What is that we have understood from all the definition here? It's very clear that an interview is a process in which we or you, the person who seeks a job, is communicating with the person who is trying to get us and make us an employer. In other words, I can say it is a discussion between we, the future employee, and the employer who tries to find whether we suit into his requirement. What is it we understood after looking into all these definitions? It's very clear that a job interview is a conversation between an employer and an optimistic candidate who is very much eager to be a part of the company itself. So, if you ask me whether these definitions are correct or not, I would rather say take everything into your mind and make sure that you're going to show your best skills, best knowledge during the interview. Now we have understood a definition of the interview. Let us see how many types of interviews are there. Probably just by seeing the screen, you must be surprised. Come on, sir, are there these many kinds of interviews? You have mentioned traditional interview, web conferencing interview, stress interview, lunch interview, face-to-face interview, career fair, video interview, competency-based interviews, group interview, informal interview, committee interview, panel interview, teleconferencing, behavior interview, case interview, one-to-one interviews, remote interviews, and phone interview. Probably don't get confused. I will make it in a very systematic way for you to understand much better what types of interviews are there in existence. If you just look into the interviews, I have classified the interviews in different forms. For example, we have informal interviews, which can be a lunch interview. Again, we have a group interview, we have a case interview, and you must have heard about stress interview, career fair interview. Quite often we call this as off-campus interview, where we go out. Again, I have labeled traditional interview, one-to-one interviews, face-to-face interviews, and competency-based interviews under one roof. Let us not classify them as different forms of interviews. Rather, I have arranged every of this interview under one roof. Similarly, I have arranged phone interview, video interview, remote interviews, teleconferencing, web conferencing interviews under one roof, because there will be only slight changes. For example, just see the traditional interview, one-to-one interview, face-to-face interview, competency interview. The method of interviewing is similar. Not much difference between the way they adopt. Similarly, you can call the phone interview, video interview, telephone conferencing, web conferencing as remote interviews. So that's the reason why I have clubbed all these interviews under one roof. Again, informal interviews can be clubbed with a lunch interview because it's also a kind of informal interview. Just see the next kind of interview. I have clubbed panel interviews and committee interviews together because, again, not much difference is there in these two kinds of interviews. Let's see very clearly and let's learn how these interviews are different from each other. So I have given you 6 different classifications: traditional interview under one roof, remote interviews under another roof, panel interview with another roof, informal interviews in another roof. I have separated group interviews, case interviews, test interviews, and career fair interviews under a different category. To have better understanding, let us go step by step so that we get very clear idea which interview is for you and which interview again is for you as you acquire experience. I want to communicate a very simple explanation. Not all the interviews will be available for a fresher. Not all these types of interviews will be arranged or available for an experienced guy. Based on the experience, based on the need, the type of interview will change from person to person, from requirement to requirement. That is a basic understanding that we all should have. Let's see one after the other. The first kind of interview which I want you to understand is a traditional interview. In other words, it is called as one-to-one interview. We can also call that as face-to-face interview. And again, it is an interview which will check your competencies. What do I mean by competencies? It refers to skills. It can be your behavior, it can be your attitude, it can be your communication skills, it can be your proficiency, it can be your subject knowledge, and whatnot. It can be the way you talk with a person who is going to recruit you. All these things clubbed together is called competency-based interviews. In this interview, a candidate is tested in all the skills, and the reason for testing all the skills is to ensure the candidate fits into the shoe of the employer. And the employer ensures once a candidate is selected, they will be very resourceful to the company itself. And you can name this as a traditional interview because in a traditional interview, we have the interviewer in front of us and we will be answering the questions raised by the interviewer. Similarly, in the competency interview as well, we'll be having a face-to-face discussion. That's the reason why I have brought a traditional interview, face-to-face, one-to-one, under one single roof. Again, why there is a need to understand different acronyms or different names? We all have the habit to check whether the teacher gives us the right information because it's really good. I really appreciate that. What our teacher tells you cannot be facts to some extent. It's always good to go and have a web search. When you happen to go for a web search, when you just type types of interviews, different websites may give different names. Unless you read the substance, unless you read the content, you will think that there can be 20 different kinds of interviews. And that will give you a pressure. To avoid it, I have brought some of the interviews which has similar methods under one roof. Hope you understood very well about a traditional interview. In a nutshell, I can say a traditional interview is a face-to-face interview where the employer can understand you very well with your verbal as well as your non-verbal clues. Your attitude, your behavior, your subject knowledge, your expertise, everything can be visibly seen and felt by the employer. And that's the reason why many companies prefer to have this kind of job interview. Moving on to the next kind of interview, we can call that as remote interviews. What is remote? Bit away, maybe a short distance or far away distance, where the candidate will be in some other place and the person who is going to take an interview may be in some other place, maybe in the same country or in the different country. If you ask me, sir, you are telling that traditional interviews is mostly preferred by the companies and will it be for the freshers or guys with experience? Then my answer is very simple. If you are a fresher, you can expect a traditional way of interview rather than a phone interview or video conferencing interview unless there is a need. Because that's your first step into a company. So a company will ensure that your relationship with the company will be long lasting. So they are ready to invest a lot of time to ensure that they are going to take the right candidate for their work. And what about this interview, which is called a remote interview? Usually remote interviews may be conducted for candidates who are in other countries, or usually it is conducted when there is a difficulty for the candidate to travel for a long time in a short notice. Let's say that I'm in Chennai and you are in Delhi. If a company in Delhi is going to call me and they are calling me the next day, Sometimes it's not possible even with the aircraft connectivity. There might be difference in the time that you fix for the interview, and my aircraft time may be different from your expectations. So in that condition, the companies will go for a remote interview, either through telephone calling or through video conferencing. In recent days, we have technology where we can see face to face through videos, and the company prefers to have a video conferencing interview rather than a telephone interview, unless you don't want to see the HR or the manager who is going to call you. That's the only difference we have. Most companies, they migrated to use video conferencing rather than a telephone call. Hope you understood what is a remote interview. In a remote interview, you may have or you may not have a chance to see who is conducting the interview, because that might be a company protocol. And secondly, they may not know your verbal and non-verbal clues very clearly. So make sure that you're going to give the best of your time during such interviews, in case, as a fresher, if you happen to get this opportunity. Now let's look into the third kind of interview, which is called a panel interview or a committee interview. When I tell a panel or a committee, it must be very clear that it is not taken by one single member. It is conducted by a group of members for one particular candidate. I will give you an example why the company prefers to have a panel interview or committee interview. Let's say I'm supposed to be recruited as a dean of an institution. To be a dean, I should have a lot of skills. First of all, I must be having a managing skill. I must have good communication skill. I must be financially strong to make sure that everyday transaction is kept very well. And I must be academically sound based on the expectation of the institution. Similarly, there are different kinds of skill that is expected from a dean. So just imagine, for selecting me as an individual for the post of dean, who else will sit there? Who are all the members will sit there? We will have the academic head, who will check whether my academic is really good, whether I know the functions very well when it comes to academic research. Again, we'll have people from research, because research is one key factor which is going to take the university to the next level or the institution to the next level. So the research office person will be there to assess me. Am I having in-depth idea about the research, which I can assist my school teachers as well as my scholars in my school. Then I will have a person from a finance who will check whether I have some basic idea about the financial aspects related to the function of the institution. I may have the vice chancellor who will check whether he can communicate very well between the faculty, and he can be a bridge between student, faculty, and the vice chancellor. So that is called as a committee. Hope you understood what is the need for a committee interview. In case of you, or in case of somebody who is technically ready to face an interview, there can be members from different departments. Probably let's have another example. Let's say that you are an expert in artificial intelligence, or you are an expert in international business. Your resource may be very much useful for the sales team. It may be very much useful for the marketing team. It can be very much useful for the production team. So naturally, you will have representatives from 3 different teams to recruit you, because your service is going to be given to all these teams. That's the reason why we have a panel, or in other way we can say as a committee. Hope you understood what is the difference between the 2 other forms of interviews which we discussed earlier and a panel interview. Now, if you are a fresher, I'm sure there is a lighter chance for you to have this kind of interviews, unless you are exceptional with too many areas of specialization. But it's always good that you can have an idea about this kind of interview as well. Now, Moving on to the next kind of interview, we call this as a lunch interview, informal interview, casual interview. Hello, my dear. In case if you are a fresher, or in case if you're very new to the interview, don't even think of having this kind of interview. Usually, this kind of interview is called for a person who are experts or already in a very senior level or working for a very big company in a very big role. Usually, these kind of interviews are arranged for those kind of people. Let's say I have a company, multinational company, in different parts of the globe, and I want to hire a person who works for another company, maybe my competitor in Singapore. So I want to have a very casual talk with him. Hey, Karthik, would you like to work for us? I have seen your database. You are remarkably good. I also know how much you may be getting, or I'm ready to pay you whatever you prefer to have at the best from my side. So these kind of interviews is usually conducted by the employer who knows the value of the person who is sitting in front of them for the interview. Which means that not everybody is called for a lunch interview or informal interview unless they have a sound knowledge about your skills. Naturally, these kind of interviews are for experienced person, maybe working with a competitor. And when we say an informal, they don't have the meeting in the company premises. They don't have a structured place to conduct the interview. It can be in a cafeteria, it can be in a restaurant, or it can be in a hotel or at home itself. So that is a baseline that you must understand. The other kind of interview is called a group interview. Again, that is the difference between a panel interview and a group interview. In a panel interview, you will be the only person who may be judged by different kinds of people from the company. In case of a group interview, the scenario is different. You can be many persons, and the interviewer may be one. I'll give an example. When a company calls for an interview for a sales representatives, let's say I have a company, I'm recruiting people to sell my product. When I happen to call them, I don't look for one sales representative. Rather, I look for many sales representatives who will take my company to the next level. So what I do, I just give an advertisement calling for people who are very much interested in sales, but they must have a qualification, a basic qualification. So if I'm going to spend the time individually, that may be a lengthy process. Rather, I call as groups, maybe some 10 or 15 people together, and make them to have a talk or ask them questions. Just see how they answer as an individual to promote my product. So that's the reason why we have an interview form called as a group interview. I repeat, there'll be one or two recruiters or members of the company who is going to recruit. They will just call a team of people who are very much interested for a particular job, and they will ask questions, and they will just see how they respond as an individual. So assessment will be made. If I want to give you another example, it's something like a group discussion. They will give you a topic where you will talk about it, and it is easy for the person who is assessing to say who is best. Similarly, in a group interview, a company can call many people at one stage, ask some questions related to their efficiency in sales. I'm giving an example as sales. It can be anything. And try to get them a maximum output from them. So that is why group interviews are used. In another situation like mass recruitment, when a company goes for a mass recruitment outside the premises, they may be expecting 100, but suddenly if there are 1,000 people who comes for the interview, then again they go for such kind of practice, which is called as a group interview. Usually they follow a protocol. They send you an email for a confirmation whether you will come or not. But there is always a chance that when they go for mass recruitment, things may not go as planned. There might be different pressures from different agencies to have interviews for all the participants. So naturally, they may force to go with a group interviews as well. See, this interview is called case interview. Usually, case interviews are given for people from business background. For example, if you are a BBA or MBA graduate, or if you are from statistic department or mathematical department, you may be expecting a case interview. What is a case interview? They will give you a problematic problem. So they may give you a problematic situation related to finance, related to business, or related to banking, depending upon the nature of the recruitment, the nature of the opening, and they may ask you to give a solution. Please keep in mind, this must be a real-time problem which the company has faced in the previous years as well. There is always a chance. So they just try to give a real-time case to the participants, and they may ask you what will be your idea in case if you are in a situation like this. And if you can give an exemplary answer, which will be really very fruitful for their ideas, you are in. So case interviews are usually for business scenarios and for recruiting people from business background. It will test how efficient the candidate is with reference to the business world. So that is all about case interview. The next kind of interview is called stress interview. Probably the word must have communicated what is stress and what is interview. So this interview is going to be a lot of stress, with a lot of stress. Stress in the sense, pressure from the questions they ask. Before you complete answering the first question, they may ask you with question number 2. Again, before you complete a question number 2 answer, they may ask you question number 3. And all the questions may be irrelevant, or there might not be any continuity in the question. For example, let's say the first question can be, how will you solve this problem? The second question, do you think it is feasible for India to change its economic policy? The next question may be on some other topics. So naturally, they will ensure to fluctuate from one topic to another. They will just check how good you are in managing with the answer, a very proper answer. And it will take you to a position where you say, come on, leave me, I'm not for this kind. In case if you're going to say like that, you are not fit. They want people who can work under a pressure like this from different people in a workplace. So usually a stress interview is given for managing people, managers, supervisors, floor managers. There are many positions in the companies with supervision or managerial post. So this interview is usually conducted for people like them. And if you just see the image which is given there, it says, come on, leave me, I'm not for this job. The next interview, which you and me quite often experience, is a career fair interview. In case if you are from an institution which is not fully grown, which is not flourishing very well, then your institution always opt for taking the students to a career fair. This career fair is often arranged by government or NGOs or some of the industries union, where they prefer a common place and they have the interview on a common date. And the reason for having this kind of interviews is to bring people who are not so good in facilities inside the campus or in the institutions, and try to bring them to a common place. This career fair will also be an eye-opener for all those of you who are aspiring to get a job as well. Whatever you miss in the campus interviews, you can always come for a job interview, which are arranged by different companies under one roof. And what we should understand about this career fair, a career fair usually will have a lot of companies. And there is no rule that if you're from a software engineer, you will be taken or you will be having interviews only from a software company. It's something like visiting or entering into an open market where you have lot many opportunities, and if the company thinks that you fit into the shoes, you get an offer. Usually, there is no way for or no room for one-to-one interview or casual interview like lunch interviews. It is going to be a group interview because they need to cater different kinds of people who are coming from different parts of the place for this interview. So the company also will have a lot of choices. Just imagine a company going to institution X. They may have an opportunity to meet some 200 students or 300 students, but in a career fair, they can meet up to 3,000 students, which means that they have a lot of choices. If they get a better choice, it's always good for the company. So companies sometimes prefer to go to a career fair in case if it is a moderate company or less or low budget company. What I mean by low budget doesn't mean that the company is very small, nothing like that. They have multiple choices for different kinds of levels of employees which they are looking for. So that's the difference. So usually career fair is always good. In case if you don't have an option for placement inside your campus, then I always recommend you to go for a career fair interview as well. So that brings us to the end of the session on a job interview. Hope you have understood different kinds of definitions pertaining to job interviews. We also seen how job interviews are classified. We also learned what exactly is expected from different kinds of interviews. And I hope that this information will be very much useful to you. Thank you very much for your patience listening, and let's join for another video. Thank you.